To all. I'm Mr. Saurwein, one of the directors of iCAAD, and before we start, I'd like to say a few things. There's some headsets. As I was saying, welcome. Just a little bit on iCAAD. iCAAD is an international conference. The objective is to promote debate associated to addiction in a neutral, open way, whatever the position, opinion. iCAAD is based in London. Our main event will be on the 1st and 2nd and 3rd of May in London. And we also carry out conference days in Europe. 3 weeks ago, Brussels, coming in Italy, Madrid, Reykjavik, Iceland. So we're trying to promote in a neutral way to help each one learn and share. We have partners worldwide. They are sponsors. They're very active in the industry and do that because they really want to promote an open dialogue based on disorders, pathologies that you find worldwide connected to conflicts also. Every 4 seconds, an addict dies. So since I started, it's 2 747 Boeings crashing. You can imagine. Bear that in mind. We worked on a title for here. We want to be united here. And a friend of mine was saying, he was an English parliamentarian, and he said, how come, said the MP, why does the police speak in one way, the legal profession works in one way, it's not good, you end up in jail. But you as doctors, you who have solutions, you come and speak in a multiple type of ways. I think it's important to speak in different voices and share in our unique way our different therapies. And why, as I said, every 4 seconds an addict dies. And so this multidisciplinarity is very important to see how we deal with this, knowing where we stand, and most importantly, how we can share. How does this work? This morning, we will have Micheline Clodon speaking in the name of the whole group. And then Philippe Witt will be talking about burnout. It's connected to addiction. That's the highest reason for addiction. There are all levels. It's not only company leaders that involve burnout, everybody. Then there's a relation with psychological and corporal balance in treating the addict in his family. Federico Caro will talk about this. Then he will start talking about the personality of the person and all the people around that addict. And then the founder of the Valdoise EDVO experience will come and talk to us, Mr. Bruno, and then we'll hear about Aubervilliers through the Aurore presentation from Susie Longbottom. She'll talk to you about something very interesting, the holistic, corporal, and psychotherapy all brought together in one in her community and in her approach, therapeutic approach. Then we have Mario Blaise, who's in charge of the Marmottan Medical Center. He's going to talk about the come back and forth in treatment. What do you do? They keep coming back and keep coming back. And then Michel Renaud, a professor, who will be talking to us about how you can connect with internet and be in contact with everyone. Connect and talk, not only with the people right around you, but beyond that. We all have a small connection, our small community where we are. And when you are involved with an addiction, I always have somebody who talks to me and calls me about a brother, a husband, and so forth. And so new technologies and internet have and play a huge role in this. And then we'll close with the round table, bringing together Professor Renaud, Dr. Costa Sagas, who came from London. He's well known in the addiction treatment in the public community. Dr. Marius Blaise will be here. And then Mr. Pliez will be here also. He is the one who was involved in Larivoisière in the consumer room where the least risk is run by addicts who can come in and have their fix there. That's what I wanted to share with you at this point, just to give you some background for our presentation. As things stand right now, I think around addiction, there are 4 ways of tackling this. You have the civil society talking about judgmental. They're judgmental. They talk about moral order. When you suddenly walk around and listen to people walking in the street, addiction means weakness, poor behavior. You can hear all of that. It's the way that it comes out on top of everything else. And so the medical world talks about the symptom and how to cure it. The scientific world talks about the brain malfunction. And we're starting to talk about the epigenetic impact, the transformation of genes in the human species, and we're starting to have a good understanding of what is happening. It's not substance as such, it's the personality. We're starting to see addiction as an overall, a general, comprehensive brain disorder. It leads to the use of substances. And then you have the addict, the one. I also have a very strong addiction that I had to fight, and so you talk about, as an addict, you talk about fear, chaos, and the mal de vivre, the difficulty to live. I'm addict because it's difficult for me to live. I'm going to draw from addictive processes to be able to try and live. A normal person will indeed use substances to have a break, to come out of the daily routine. And an addict will use all sorts of substances to try and live. That is subtle difference. It's 2 sides of the same coin that is very difficult to understand and to use. That's the message I wanted to share with you. Those are definitions. We're a bit late, so I'll breeze through these and not use too much of your time on that. And there's something that I want us to bear in mind. Addiction calls for dependence. Dependency doesn't always mean addiction. There's a triangle. Addictive disorders is a mental pathology, addiction is a behavior, and dependency is a state more or less long one. And then we can find we can deal with this in different ways. And so if you keep peeling this onion, you're going to end up with the mental pathology, the fact that you don't have this craving to live anymore. And then you have a substance, you have to cut down the dependency. You have this cloud of addictive behavior with alcohol, sex, work also. And an addict has worked around this to try and live and give sense to her life. And once you've dealt and tackled with all this, you end up with the disorder, dopamine, mental pathology that calls for a background treatment. And you can deal with this entering it through one of these 3 doors. You can understand the addictive behaviors, 5, 6, 7 addictions that are constantly leading you into a toxic tango dance, and starting out with a mental pathology, and then you end up with what the Americans call the trauma. I call it the painful childhood experience, when personality is built and the dopaminic system is being built during childhood, starting at childhood. I wanted to share this with you and remind you of the fact that there are 3 types of addictions. The dopamine, you have the chemical ones, alcohol, drugs, medicine, bonsai, zombie drugs. We don't know much about that. And then the social status dopamine, and that's quite complex also. Work, purchasing, expenses, gaming, relations, social network, different other ways. And then the prehistoric dopamine, I'd like to talk about that. What I call prehistoric dopamine, that's sex and food. Those are the two survival mechanisms that we've known for millions of years. That's why you are on Earth. There's a reproduction of genes and metabolization. All this is very important because this is linked to primary survival instincts. When they are set up in addictive ways, it's very difficult to pull back because abstinence doesn't work. Sexual abstinence leads to other pathologies, and if you starve, you die. A comment on one of the latest clinical studies in London that I did. Patients were in residential situation. 63.5% had more than 5 addictions. And so the question is not to be an addict to something, it's to understand the complex addiction mechanisms for one given person. And then how do you deal with this? That's just an example, but I'll skip for now. And that's the message. A normal individual will use whatever it is to open up a parenthesis in his life, to take a break. You go into a disco, you do something. An addict will use or take drugs, whatever it is, to deal with life. For 20 years, I took medicine every time I went to the office. I sniffed cocaine, and I did that for 20 years. It has nothing to do with fun. It leads to the way you want to live. And that's a personal example that I'm giving you. And then I love to quote Marguerite Duras, French author. Alcohol addiction change or transfigures the ghosts of solitude and replace the other who is not there. It fills in gaps that are inside us. One day, long time ago, those gaps appeared. So attached to solitude, to all these areas that we want to fulfill, and Duras had a very poetic way of saying what I took 10 minutes to tell you. I think when we deal with addicts, poetry is one way of dealing with addicts. It's a way of talking, a very sensitive way of expressing things, and the addict is able to hear that. I've started using quotations, poetry, when I talk and deal with a patient, and it works well, better than all sorts of psychoeducational slogans or phrases. That's what I wanted to share with you. I suggest a brief break next, and at 10 o'clock, 10:05, Micheline Clodon. Oh, you are here. Hello, Micheline Clodon. You might want to take your headsets, some of you, and then we will listen to Micheline. Thank you very much. Welcome, Micheline.